Hi, welcome back for another Tool Time Tuesday. I'm Melissa Muir. In this video, we're working on project number 13 in the Revere series of the professional jewelry making. This is the sister clasp. Let's get to work. So first thing we need to do is we need to get the pattern for our sister clasp. Now you can either download this on the Facebook group, I'll include the link in the description of our video, or you can actually copy this out of the book. Now in the book, the template that they have in there is just slightly larger than what it's meant to be. So we're looking for about 12.5 millimeters from the top of the clasp to the bottom of the clasp. Now what I've done here, you'll see that there's actually kind of a stack of stuff. So I have taken a layer of the silver and put it onto, glued a piece of paper onto it and glued another layer of silver, and then I've glued the top pattern onto this. And that is going to allow me to cut out two pieces at the same time. Now we're using 1 millimeter sheet for this, which is approximately 18 gauge. So once you have this part all glued on, I let this set up for about a day and a half just to make sure that the glue is really on there dry. And now I'm ready to cut this out with my jeweler's saw. Once you have this all pierced out, you want to spend some good bonding time with your files and get everything cleaned up. Notice that I have not yet pierced out the hole in the center, and I'm going to wait for just a little bit on that. And in the meantime, I'm going to take some time and just kind of clean up where I'm off ever so slightly on this piercing. Once we have everything so that it matches up nicely, you've got nice parallel lines on all edges, then we want to separate these, and we are going to begin to round the front edges of our sister hook. Now before I separate this, I need to drill out and pierce out that center hole that is going to then hold our sister hook together and allow it to move. Once we have both sides separated, they look good. They should be pretty much identical at this point. And what we're going to do is take them and keep them so that they face the same direction. What's going to happen is once we get this completed, we will then place the two together kind of like this so that they will open and close. So what needs to happen is the outside faces need to be rounded and sanded and filed so that they are nice and smooth and have that good texture to them. Now, in order for both of the outsides to be the same, you actually lay them down so that they look identical, and you're going to do the same thing to both of these. So I'm going to start by pulling this into my bench pin. So using my files, I'm going to begin rounding the face of only one side, and again, I want to make sure that I round the same face on both pieces. You also want to make certain that the round part right here is a 2.6 millimeter inner diameter, because we are going to be putting a piece of tubing in there to hold these two pieces together. So we need to make sure that that is the right size. If you need to, use your round files and you can kind of round that out. Make sure that you take your measurements from time to time just to kind of see where you are. Once you have these outer edges smooth and rounded, you want to take a ball burr and ever so slightly just countersink this circle right here. So now that we have both of the hooks ready to go, they've both been rounded out, we've kind of given a little bit of a countersink to that. Now what we need to do is create the tubing that is going to go into this. Now there's a number of ways that you can do this. We can use a sheet, kind of like what I have here, and we can pull this through a draw plate, or you can even do it similar to maybe how you would do a bezel. But in either way, you still need to be able to calculate and figure out how to make this. Now in the back of the book in the appendix, there is a formula that allows you to figure out how to make the proper diameter of tubing that you are after. In this case, we are looking for a 2.6 millimeter. That's what our inner hole should be, is 2.6 millimeter inner diameter on the on our hook. So it needs to be 2.6 outer diameter on our little tubing that we are going to create. Now we're going to be using 0.3 millimeter sheet, and that is approximately 28 gauge. So you can see, depending on where I'm at, sometimes I get a little bit less or a little bit more than 0.3 millimeters, but we're really close. So again, about 28 gauge for this. So in this case, I'm going to just use my caliper here. We want to start off with a piece that is 8.3 millimeters wide and about 50 millimeters long. So I'm just going to go ahead and go the whole length of this. We're a little bit longer than 50 millimeters, but I want to have enough for a good long draw dog. So I'm going to come out here to 8.3. And I like to tighten that up just a little bit, so I'm just barely above, but we're talking about a hair. So what I'm going to do is use my caliper here, and I'm going to scribe along my piece. And now I have a score line that I can come in and cut along. You want to take the time and just double check your measurements. Now here on one end, I happen to be about spot on at about 8.29. That's pretty close. And then on the other end, I was just a little bit over. And that's because as I was cutting, things moved a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this larger end for creating my draw dog. And the draw dog is what we're going to hold on to as we pull it through our draw plate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to taper the end of this, and that's what I'm going to then hold on to. Now, I'm just going to use a pair of shears. And that gives us a nice taper here that will be able to fit into our draw plate, and we should be able to pull that through. Now the next thing that has to happen is I need to begin to curve this. And this is kind of like making a spiculum. And that's just kind of a round form using your hammer and either a groove that's been filed into your bench block or a piece of wood, or in my case, I'm going to be using a wood swage block. Now, if you've not already done this, you need to make sure that you have annealed your metal because we want it to be able to move. Now, what we need to do is curl the ends around so that they start to form kind of a C shape. And I'm going to use my Goldsmith hammer to do this. So I want this cross peen. And what I'm going to do is just bring this in and hammer it into my groove. Now again, you can file a groove into a piece of wood or whatever else the case might be, but since I have this swage block, it's what I'm going to use. Now I do want that groove to come all the way up here. If it happens to start to twist, you can just, at this point, kind of give it a little twist to straighten that out. And then I'm going to work my way into a smaller groove. And again, I'm going to go down to the next smaller groove. Now again, if things have started to twist, you can just twist them back into where they need to be. Now at this point, you could leave this where it is, but what I like to do is to use my Goldsmith hammer and use the flat face of this now, and just to bring these sides in ever so slightly a little bit more. And that is going to help to have the shape that we need when we go to draw this. And you can see, and here I'm doing this very, very, very gently. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And now we are ready to start pulling this through the draw plate, or you could continue to close this form just a little bit more. That's up to you. So what I've done here is I've tightened up a lot right here, especially at the draw dog. And what that's going to do is as we pull this through the draw plate, it's going to help to guide and close up our seam. Now, if you are well versed enough in some of the shell forming techniques, you can easily get this closed up a little bit and then begin to draw this through. But we're going to go through it with it just like it is now. One thing to note is you probably want to make your draw dog a little longer than you think. Sometimes what I run into is the draw dog will actually start to break off when you go to pull the metal through the draw plate. So what we want to do is we want to make certain that our draw plate is nice and tight in here. So make sure that you've got it well secured. I want to pull this into the first hole, or whichever hole I begin to receive some kind of resistance. I'm also going to lubricate my tubing, and I'm going to do this with just a liquid lubricant. Pull that into here. I'm going to grab onto this draw dog, and we're going to give a nice steady pull all the way through, and we can see that it is beginning to close up our seam. Bring it into the next one. Do the same type of thing, and again, a nice steady pull. And we're getting our seam much closer now. Now as I do this, I want to bring in my caliper, take a measurement. We're at 3 millimeters right now and we need to be at 2.6. So we're going to continue on. I'm going to add just a little bit more lubricant, go into my next hole, again grab with my draw dog and repeat the process. Check my measurement, 2.87, so we have just a little bit more to go. Again, I'm going to add a little bit more lubricant and bring me down into the next lower hole. We're at a 2.8, so we just need to keep on going. Two 2.7. .64, almost there. And we're just below our 2.6, so we are right where we need to be. Now that I have the tubing done, I'm going to do a really quick test fit to see how well it works in here. And as you can see, we're actually really good. There's a little bit of movement, which I'm going to need, but not too much, which we're pretty much spot on. So I'm very happy with this. Next thing I need to do, because we are going to be flaring this, we actually need to solder our seam. Now there's a number of different ways that you can solder this tubing closed, and the book shows a couple of different ways. So whichever way you choose to do, you need to make sure that you take some time to kind of clean this up. Now cutting tubing can be a little bit difficult, so I find that using a tube cutting jig is something that's very handy. And what I'm going to do is, in my case, I have a little section of tubing that does not look fantastic. So I'm going to cut that part off first, and then I'm going to mark my 3 millimeter piece. So we want that 3 millimeters by 2.6 by 0.3 millimeter for our walls inside. So I've set this for 3 millimeters, and now I'm just going to run this around and score my tubing. Then I can place this back into my tube cutting jig, lining up that score with my slot for cutting. So now I have my tube. So the next thing we need to do now is assemble everything. Now remember, we want these hooks to have that kind of soft rounded side on the outside. And then I'm going to take my tubing and I'm going to insert it into the hole that we've created. Perfect. And that is a fantastic fit. Now what I'm going to do is I want to flare this, and in this case I have some very small dapping punches that I can use to accomplish this task. So what I'm going to do first is place the dapping set, or just my dapping punch. I'm going to use a chasing hammer, and I'm just going to give a couple of taps to flare this out just a little bit. Then I'm going to flip this over, reposition my piece here. Again, I'm going to place it inside and give a couple of taps. So at this point, both sides have flared a little bit. I shouldn't be able to pull my piece out at all, my little tubing that I have in here. I'm going to switch to a slightly larger dapping punch, and I'm going to repeat this process a few more times. And each time I'm going to flip this over and punch again. And I'm going to keep doing this until this has been flared. Now once you've done that, you don't want to go too far, or you will lock it into place and it will make it so that it cannot open and close. So you want to make sure that you can still move this, open and close this. Then once you have that done, you're going to use some abrasive paper to remove kind of that outer edge of this tube rivet that we've just created, and you want to bring it flush onto your piece so that the outer edges of this disappear. I've created a coil of 1.3 millimeter wire, or about 16 gauge, and I've also wrapped it around a 3.5 millimeter mandrel. So this is going to be what I use to connect my sister hook onto my chain. At this point I want to attach my clasp, and now I need to polish everything up. Back in chapter 10, we made a foxtail chain. Now this is the perfect project for using this clasp. So what I'm going to do is just insert my chain into the jump ring here, close that up, and now I have my completed bracelet. So now we have our completed bracelet. I've just created a larger loop that I hooked into the one end of my chain, and the sister clasp hooked onto the other. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and ring the bell so that you get those notifications when I create new videos. Now keep in mind, again, I'm not a professional yet, working on it, and this project was not a simple one for me. While things might look a little bit simple here in the video, just know this particular one is probably my third or my fourth. And even though it's my third or fourth, there's still a few little things that I feel like I could do a little bit better. So don't get too frustrated if you guys are working through it. Keep at it, and I look forward to seeing your creations as well. Have a good day.